All right, well, welcome everyone. Sorry for we're a few minutes late, but really want to thank you all for joining us for today's mCLASS Customer Roundtable presentation. We have a handful of mCLASS users from around the country here to talk about their experiences using the product. So just really excited to kind of kick off this discussion. Couple housekeeping tips before we get started. We have a transcriptionist on the call who will be producing subtitles throughout. There's a CC button on your menu. You can click that to see them. This webinar will be recorded. We will send it out in an email tomorrow. So if you have to drop off early, don't worry. You'll be getting the full recording from us afterwards. Most importantly, please put any questions you have for the educators or Karen throughout into the Q&A icon on the menu. That'll be at the bottom of the screen as well. You can also put questions in the chat box. It's going to be on the right as well. We're going to do our best to answer questions throughout and at the end. So just ask anything that comes to mind. So with that, I will hand it over to our moderator, Karen Venditti, to get us started.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate that. So excited today. We've got such a great team of educators joining us. And so I will kick it off with moving that slide. For some of you, you may have already come to some of our webinars. Unfortunately, my partner in crime could not be here today. And so, yeah, that chokes me up. I'm Karen Venditti, and I'm a literacy specialist with Amplify and have been working in the science of reading field for a number of years now, getting to meet wonderful people like those educators on the call today. So we are excited to share that. And I know you came to hear from them more than you came to hear from me. And you're going to hear some great stories, the great conversation around the literacy system. And so we want to hear who's joining from outside of Amplify and outside our panel. So we'd love for you to, we're going to put a poll up there and let's see, are we going to get that poll up? Maybe.
Karen, the poll did not save. I will put the second one in, but we can do it maybe verbally.
That's okay. So why don't we type in the chat, who's joining us today? What role do you have? Where are you coming from today? We'd love to know that. I love it. People are sharing lots. And remember, when you're sharing in the chat, share with everyone. So not just the panelists, and because we want to see it, but we want the world to see it too. So we've got Canada, we've got Alabama, Ohio. I love it. California, all over. So thank you. We've got teachers and leaders and New Zealand. And I've been to New Zealand. New Zealand is a wonderful place to visit. Literacy brought me to New Zealand, the International Literacy Association. All right, thank you for sharing that. And we'll hear a little bit more about you in a little bit. We're going to start. My panelists are going to just share a little bit about themselves before we hear their full story and hear from them. So Amber, let's start with you.
Thank you, Karen. My name is Amber Haney, and I work in Howard County Public School System in Maryland. And Shannon and I work together in a K-12 reading intervention office. So we've been doing that for 3 years now. And prior to that, I was a reading specialist in high school, middle school, and I dabbled in elementary for 2 years teaching like first instruction. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shannon?
Good afternoon. I'm Shannon Fuller. Like Amber said, we are partners in crime. We are the reading intervention office for Howard County Public Schools in Maryland, a new office. This is our 3rd year. Before this, I was a literacy coach, reading specialist, and classroom teacher, all in elementary. Now working K-12. So Amber has taught me a lot about secondary.
All right, welcome, Shannon.
Hi, my name is Becky Davis. I'm the Senior Academic Coordinator for K-6 ELA for Dayton Public Schools. And this is my 4th year in that position. I've worked in curriculum as a Title I teacher, as a literacy specialist, a coach, and in curriculum, all areas, K-6 in another district.
Great, thanks, Becky.
Hello, everyone. Erin Oleksa-Carter, Supervisor of Elementary Teaching and Learning in Quakertown, Pennsylvania. I also supervise ELD pre-K through 12 and the coordinator of federal programs. Prior to this, I taught 8th grade English, was assistant principal and house principal in various districts.
Okay, thanks, Erin. And last but not least, Ashlie.
Hi, I'm Ashlie Ellis. I am from Cabell County Schools in West Virginia. I currently work as an academic specialist, basically like a curriculum specialist at the district level. But previously, I was a coach and a reading specialist and working directly with students.
All right, thank you, Ashlie, and thank you, everyone. We're going to hear a lot more from these folks in just a moment. I want to set the stage, level set with some kind of understanding of what we're going to talk about today for those that may be a little bit new to Amplify. And so we like to think of that whole literacy system, that complete literacy system, because there's a lot of power in pieces working together, whether it's your assessment system, your core curriculum, the personalized learning, all of that working together really helps kiddos in terms of meeting the needs of science-based instruction. And so with that, we're going to talk about mCLASS today. We're going to talk about that data collection, the assessment, the universal screening, the progress monitoring, and how do we do that? And all of these folks, as you have heard, have a history in education and have been using mCLASS for quite a while in the collective. So it's really going to be great to hear their experiences and the successes, challenges, all of that. Now, we do want to know your familiarity. So we know different folks are at different levels of understanding coming in. So if you can share with us your familiarity, we put up a poll for you. And then we get a little bit better sense of who's joining us today. And I see we've got people from all over the world still joining. I love it. Thank you. And we'll take a moment to, and I don't know, I didn't, back on our last poll, I was a little bit thrown. So I didn't talk about the image that was on the screen. And we might have to come back to that in a little bit so that you can see that image, because that little image was something really important. All right, if we're getting folks to, if we want to share those results, I love it. We've got a great majority of people first learning about mCLASS, and then we've got others that may be using it, long time use. That's great. So we've got a range of experiences, just like we have a range of experiences with the folks on the call. So please use that chat to ask questions. We love to have the chat going, or use the Q&A. Either one, there's a Q&A at the bottom of your screen with your toolbar. Please use both of those because we want to get to your questions as well. And so as we move forward, I do want to just level set of what mCLASS is. First of all, maybe somebody can put in the chat, not from our panel, because I know they know. What does mCLASS really stand for? You can put that in first. Any guesses? You might know. I don't know if we have any prizes today. I don't know if my folks, Steve and on the call, Star Trek. How did you, somebody's got some history with Amplify. All right, I'm just gonna cut to the chase. It is mobile classroom. And that little Star Trek reference, kind of, when you think about the mobility that Star Trek had, there's some kind of a connection, and we won't go into that today. But it is all about universal screening, progress monitoring. So with the DIBELS 8th edition, the most up-to-date research-based, heavily research-based DIBELS assessment, dyslexia screening. So you've got other tools within that platform. And then goal setting. You can set goals for your students. And I know some of our folks are going to talk about that. Then there's grouping with targeted instruction. So taking all this wonderful data, and they'll talk about that, grouping your students and providing instruction along with reports, because you want to use that data. You want that data is so actionable immediately. And so those reports help teachers, help leaders, help parents, caregivers to understand that. Then we've got a few other things that we're really not talking about today, which is our intensive intervention, our math, our TRO, text reading online. But there is one thing I do have to really bring in here, even though we're not going to get into depth on it, and that's our new mCLASS Lectura. And Lectura is really that on par parity with mCLASS DIBELS 8th edition. So you're going to assess in Spanish. And we're so excited about it because the extensive research with our partnership with folks from the University of Oregon really is trying to meet the needs of districts and schools and educators and families and kiddos who want to make sure we're assessing what's important for kids and not misdiagnosing kiddos. And so you've got that in terms of dual language reporting and instruction. And so keep that in mind as we're talking today, and the wonderful things you're going to hear from our panelists, because everything that you're hearing from them, you're going to hear about, or you can hear about it at a future webinar if you want to check back with us in Spanish. So all of that comes in Spanish. So I just want to hit the measures for those folks, because we do have a lot of folks on the call that are new. And so what are you assessing? These 1-minute measures, you can see we're starting with letter naming fluency. We know that's something that folks want to find out about their students, all the way up to comprehension and everything in between. And so if you're new to the 8th edition, you might see some changes here, and we're happy to share some documents that kind of talk about some of the research behind why things were enhanced. And so that being said, I'd like to just kind of move it over and talk to our panelists. And so I think we're going to start with hearing their science of reading journey, how they got to the mCLASS system. And I know there's a lot of great stories to be had. And so Shannon and Amber, why don't we start with Howard County, because Howard County, and I do want you to make sure you tell us how big Howard County is, because when folks are on the call thinking about my system and do I have how many teachers and students to meet the needs of, I want you to really hit that home too, because that's a big difference. So Shannon and Amber, we'd love to have you start.
All right, thank you. As we mentioned earlier, we're Howard County, Maryland. Howard County has 43 elementary schools, and we have about 26,000 elementary school students, just so you can have that idea. We started this journey when Amber and I were hired 3 years ago, when the Maryland came out with the Ready to Read Act bill. And in the Ready to Read Act, the bill was that all kindergarten students and first grade students needed to be screened for potential reading difficulties. So when that happened, our county did not have a screener in place. So there was a committee of educators, community members, higher ed, parents who came together, and they went through and looked at various screeners, went through a whole vetting process, and they selected the paper and pencil DIBELS. So that's when Amber and I kind of stepped in when that happened. Since the bill said that all students had to be screened in K and 1, the first year we decided we had to turn the data, in the second year we would screen all kindergarten so that we didn't have to screen K and 1 the next year. So we decided to screen all kindergarten. I'm going to give you some timeline here because we have COVID in the middle of all of this. So we trained all of our reading specialists, which is about 80 teachers, in 2019 to the school year 1920. And those 80 reading specialists went back to their schools and they screened all of the kindergarten students, paper and pencil, and then put it into the DDS, the database. Then we did only MOY. That was it. Then the next year, we knew that we had to screen our new kindergartner. So then we would have our kindergartner and our first grade screened. We were in a pandemic. So that was 2021. So we screened all of our kindergartners virtually, but we had to add to our pool of trained teachers. So we had to train central office people. So the central office people, the reading specialists, screened all of the kindergartners, paper and pencil again. Then we're coming out of this and we go from a bill in the state of Maryland to COMAR, which is now law. And COMAR has extended it so that it's K-3 students that haven't been previously screened need to be screened. So they upped the ante of who we needed to screen. So we then knew we were looking at more students. Each year we were screening about 4,000 kindergartners, So then we're looking at, now we're going to have to screen second graders and all of those new students. Then our Board of Ed was looking at how important the science of reading is, listening to the legislation in Annapolis, our parent groups, Decoding Dyslexia, and really wanted to make sure that we weren't missing any students. So we were given the task to screen all students K-5 3 times a year this year. So right now we are in the middle of screening 26,000 students. We did BOI, and we're right now in the window, well, the MOI window just closed this week. So we're a little bit behind on our timing of other districts because we had to train about 1,200 teachers, because then we wanted the role of the screening to come not from the specialists. We wanted the classroom teachers to do the screening. And that was a big shift. And we've learned a lot from that. And I think that that's one thing I would definitely encourage, because the classroom teachers are learning so much from doing the screening themselves. That's our history of where we are with all of this. Amber, did I miss anything?
No, you explained that so well.
Okay. Thanks.
Props to you. That was very clear. Yeah, that was good.
Karen, I don't know if this is the time. Do you want me to talk about all the other pieces of what we're using, or just talk about the giving the benchmarks? And I'm using the term screening. Let me clarify that. We're calling it a screener because that is the language from the bill and from our law, COMAR. But Amplify, when I say screening, I'm referring to the benchmark. So the BOY benchmark and the MOI benchmark. We are utilizing the progress monitoring, but we've only utilized it this time with students that have fallen in the well below area. And some teachers are using it for the students in the below as well.
That's great, setting the stage for us. And I think this kind of also other folks, and Becky, I know you and I talked about the Ohio requirements, and maybe you want to share your story and how that relates, because it does a lot come down to, like what you said, the legislation and what we are required to do. So we'd love to hear from you, Becky.
Right, absolutely. So in Dayton, we are not as large as the district we just heard from, but we are a large urban district in Ohio. We have about between 12,000 and 13,000 students. We have 15 elementaries. And so my experience with mCLASS started a long time ago when I was just starting off as a Title I teacher. And we were the recipients of a Reading First grant. I'm not sure if any of you all were familiar with that. So that little picture that Karen showed earlier came from a conversation that we had where we gave it on Palm Pilots. Like that was the original, like I remember getting that, and you had to take your Palm Pilot to the sync station because there was no Wi-Fi. So you had to go and hook it up to the computer. So we started our data collection and my prior district then, and I've seen it grow since then. I've been able to see how easy it was to shift from that paper copy, to using the Palm Pilot and syncing, and then the iPod Touch. And then at that time we had Wi-Fi. So it's like, I've kind of been along on the journey here, and it's been really nice to see, how it's grown and expanded. So we in the district where I work, we were using DIBELS Next, which became Acadience Reading, and we were using the mCLASS platform as well. And we had another grant that was tied to our data. So we had to continue to use that before we could switch to DIBELS 8. We had to wait for that current grant to close out. So we did switch to DIBELS 8 this year to continue with that mCLASS platform. We just really enjoyed the reports. The teachers were very familiar. We investigated if we had stuck with DIBELS Next, what would that look like? We had a team who made the decision. They wanted to stick with mCLASS because they felt that the reports were very intuitive and they felt like it was a smooth transition. They liked the shifts to, on the prior version, you didn't give the same measures all year. And the teachers really like now giving the same measures all year, so you can compare that beginning of year to middle of year to end of year. So we have, like Karen was saying, our Ohio requirements. So we've been using DIBELS to monitor progress for our third grade reading guarantee. So students have to have a plan in place if they are designated as being not on track to be reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade. So we have that plan in place, and our progress monitoring tool is DIBELS. So teachers continue to monitor progress. We also use the data in K1 for our teacher-based teams, TBTs. Those are part of Ohio's improvement process, OIP. So the teacher-based teams report data to the building leadership team, the BLT, and then that goes to DLT. So we're looking at data, vertically. We're also excited and really hoping there's another piece of legislation that's coming down where the state that actually has come down, where we're going to be screening students for signs of markers for dyslexia. So we are waiting for the approved list, but we are very hopeful that DIBELS will meet that requirement. So we already have that in place, and then that could also meet our requirement for that state mandate as well.
Right. Thank you, Becky. What you talk about, that assessment system and all the vetting and the dyslexia screening, as Shannon mentioned as well, DIBELS is validated for dyslexia screening. So I know every state's a little different in their, analyses of that. But coming back to just how did we come to this system? How did we get the assessment? Erin, I think you've got a great story about how your district came to that and how you came to that.
Sure. And they're a little disparate, obviously. So I came from, as I explained, secondary background. I was an 8th grade English teacher, and then became a principal in this district. My superintendent didn't like our candidates for a supervisor of literacy, which was my previous position here, and came to me and said, "This is what I need you to do." And I said, "Okay, you don't say no." So of course. And also, by the way, that I really don't know much about like how kids learn to read. So I just a reminder. And he was like, "Yeah, you'll learn." Sure thing. So that was obviously the first thing I did. Being responsible for pre-K through 12 literacy, I clearly needed to know how kids learn to read and then figure out what we have in place to figure out, what's working and what's not. And first year, as with any position, I wasn't in here to throw things upside down and change everything. I did a lot of learning, a lot of reading, a lot of webinars, a lot of classes, and then spent a lot of time in classrooms, specifically primary classrooms, to learn from our teachers who know the most. And what I learned in doing so is that our assessment system wasn't something upon which we could rely. So it depended. Teachers in the same building gave the assessment differently, reported it differently. It really didn't, there was no objective measure related to our system. So, and then they're putting it in a spreadsheet, and then someone's taking it from the spreadsheet and putting it in a data system. And then that's being reported to the board as how well our students are doing. Yet teacher A and teacher B in the same, right next door to each other in a building, not to mention across the district, could be giving that assessment wildly different with different tips and hints, and we know the story there. So upon some research and with a committee of teachers, we moved to using DIBELS Next through a different provider, and that wasn't a super year. Great as far as okay, we're on the right track, but how we view and analyze this data is tough. And then quickly found, if I could give her a shout out, Monica, who became our saving grace from Amplify. And so we moved to DIBELS 8, and since then we have the data that we need to make a complete change, not only in our assessment system, but in how we teach children to read. So that data really kind of gave us the next step and helped many of our teachers to understand the why behind the instructional shifts that we had to then make.
Sorry, I was muted. I want to come back to something you said, Erin, about your learning after we hear Ashley's story, because I want to talk about how do we build capacity. And so Ashlie, let's hear from you about Cabell County.
So I'm from Cabell County in West Virginia. It's a much smaller district than we're hearing from. We do have 19 elementaries now that we recently added a virtual school, but the schools are much smaller. So, but I'm actually really fortunate. DIBELS has been in my district since the beginning of my teaching. So they were doing paper and pencil before I was here. And then when I first began, it was the old Palm Pilots. And now we have moved to the iPads. My district does a fantastic job of training teachers, and we, we're now on the newest version of DIBELS, and have had excellent support on the training. And then my new position, at the beginning of the year, I go in and give refreshers and work with new teachers so that we're trying to get as consistent as possible in our giving of it. There was like a little hiccup a few years ago. We had a switch in district leadership, and we looked at going away from DIBELS. We at one point had been K-5 for DIBELS, then we went to K-2 for DIBELS, and we had a different leadership shift with our superintendent, and they were wanting to go with a different testing, and our teachers sort of revolted. And so we're back to DIBELS for K and 1. And we do all the benchmarks, and then we have progress monitoring for our below and well below, our red and yellow students every third week. And we use it religiously through, the special ed process, and then just to track our students that are struggling. So I feel like I'm really proud of my district. They've been ahead of the game, I think, for a while, as far as finding, even though it's not legislated that we have to do a lot of that kind of stuff, seeing the importance of it and investing the money there. So at this point, we have, multiple levels of assessment. We're still using the iReady platform, but for K and 1, for our progress monitoring and all that, we're really relying on DIBELS.
So that's neat to hear that teachers really valued that, that they were getting. And I think I've heard that from all of you. Going back to and valuing that data and understanding the importance of that, and the tools, thinking about the tools that mCLASS provides for teachers, not just when we're talking about the benchmark and the progress monitoring, but, and Becky, you had mentioned the state's the licensure requirements that teachers have. And so the knowledge base of what they're coming in with. And that goes back to Erin, when you talked about yours coming from high school and the configuration, like you have different configuration in your building with the 6th grade elsewhere. And so I would love to hear from you about building, capacity, and how does mCLASS itself, or just the discussions around that, help teachers become more focused on what, when we think of those science of reading, the practices that are going to help kids in terms of becoming proficient readers. So
I can jump in, and Karen, we had talked about this. So in our district, we were very focused on guided reading. That really was the practice. And again, coming from secondary, I was like, oh, okay, sounds great. And it was the assessment that caught my attention. And then I started digging in more to what was happening instructionally, and beliefs around how kids learn to read, and then researching, excuse me. So with DIBELS assessment, we started to build the why in order to make, like I said, those instructional changes. And of course, with that came professional development. We're not very fortunate as far as a lot of time for professional development. I'm sure everybody struggles with that everywhere. So a lot of it in the beginning was voluntary, locally designed, and we used like a blog from here, article from here, let's create a Socratic seminar. And we had our teacher leaders showing up and starting to ask those questions, and maybe, share with a grade level partner or whatever. It wasn't until we went through our curriculum cycle and purchased foundations, and I believe we started in K and 1, and then built up, and really had the programmatic professional development that our teachers kind of were forced to push into that, and learn what text to use for what purpose, right? And how we need to shift our instruction away. Because certainly when we started DIBELS, it wasn't, certainly teachers weren't like, oh, great, I'm just gonna put this aside. Many were like, okay, we're gonna do this, and also I'm gonna do this. Thanks. Some reported it even after we were like, I'm not collecting this anymore. I don't care. I shouldn't say I didn't. I'm sure I didn't say I don't care. But I'm not collecting what guided reading level our children are on. And some still sent it to me. Okay, thank you. Now let's look at DIBELS and what is this teaching us and telling us? And that really built the why, like I said, to get more professional development and learn the science of reading and how children learn to read and what our next steps are in instruction. And we're slowly cycling that up through intermediate now to, we have a 6th grade center, which is separate from our elementaries and separate from middle. So this is our first year at the 6th grade center. And I can tell you, as a previous middle school teacher, I didn't know how kids learn to read, but I know that many of my children would have benefited and I would have been a better teacher if I knew and had the data to help inform that.
And
I was going to add on about kind of our journey with that was also, you know, we've had DIBELS in place for a while, like I said, but then we were, you know, making that shift to DIBELS 8, and we had the same concern that Erin did, which was we don't have time. We did not, you know, so I, you know, reached out to our rep, and they made all these different PD paths that were possible, different ways that we could take working with the time that we had. So we ended up doing some core training for our teacher leaders to then help support in their buildings. And there were also some like module videos that people could watch that really helped. But I think that having that flexibility really helped us, because with the pandemic, we really were just not sure of how we could, you know, make that rollout happen. But now I feel like we've had it in place for a long time, but we're beginning the shifts to the science of reading. So it's almost like, okay, remember, you know, how we give DIBELS, look at how that fits in with the science of reading. So it's almost like we're retrofitting, like, okay, you've been giving it. So let's have a deeper discussion about what does PSF tell us, you know, phoneme segmentation fluency. What does that tell us about a student's abilities within those foundational skills, and we can connect it to, you know, the reading rope. So I think it's like, oh, so we're starting to make those connections where we gave the assessment before, but and we, you know, we instructed using it, but now they have a deeper understanding of how to really connect it to how students learn to read.
well, and I think that's so important, Becky, that you're talking about connecting it back to that reading rope, having teachers build that understanding, if they might not have it, of how these skills being assessed can help guide my instruction. I mean, that's the goal. You also mentioned professional development. You mentioned that different path. Something that I want to share. I mean, and Erin already mentioned the name Monica, and I know Shannon and Amber really shared with me that they have Dory and Katie on speed dial, and I'd love to hear about that, you know, partnership that you have that helps you help your teachers.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start, and then Amber, you can add in. Since we were going from training just the reading specialists to all of these teachers, we were panicking. And I want to say we put the cart before the horse a little bit, but we had to do it. We had to get the teachers trained. We had core instruction in place that was focusing on the science of reading, but along with what Erin said, we were so vested in guided reading that we're still breaking that relationship up with some teachers. They are secretly benchmarking these students with, you know, getting the teachers to see the value of the Amplify data and how it supports or how it can help them making decisions with core instruction. I think we're just getting there. We're getting through to K1 and 2. Second grade, our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers, we're teaching them. We're providing that professional development. And that's where we've been able to lean in on Dory. And Dory is our professional development contact. Katie is our main contact. They have been so instrumental in this because they understood that we really should have had professional development first, then given the assessment. We didn't have time for all of that. We had to get the teachers trained, get the assessment, and now we're moving kind of backwards where the teachers learned how to read the data after the BOI. We wish they would have seen some of what the data is going to look like, right? It's working itself out, but with a group that large, it's been so important to have the support of Dory. And like what Becky mentioned, they have so many amazing strategies or avenues or platforms of how to get this professional development in. And they worked with us with our operating system. We have Canvas, we used Canvas. They helped make the modules. They made it so that every teacher was able to log in. It was, and we're talking, like I said, it was 1,200 teachers that we had to get trained. And we had a half a day in the August to get these teachers trained. So what, 3 hours? Then we were able to, with support from administration, give them other time to finish up their training. But there's no way without having Katie and Dory there that we would have been able to do that. I don't want to leave out Kai. Kai is our tech person, and Kai has also been one that has been very supportive because, as you guys know, working with all of these different operating systems and these different platforms, sometimes they don't play nicely together. So making sure that you have a contact person that can help you weave through, okay, I know another path of trying to get this in there is important to have. I don't know if that's what you wanted me to go with, but there it is.
Definitely. I appreciate hearing that because it takes a village, right? I mean, it does take a village, and at Amplify, it's really important to us to make sure that teachers, leaders, students, families feel comfortable utilizing the tools, because that's how we're going to move the needle. And, Ashlie, we hadn't heard from you about how, in terms of building capacity or professional development, how is that? Because you've been using DIBELS for a long time.
We have been using DIBELS, and I guess briefly before my time, guided reading did take a little bit of a hold. However, we were still using DIBELS. And so it's kind of weird how those kind of went together. So we too still have some teachers that are pretty steeped in guided reading. But what we've done to combat that is we've done a lot of training in the science of reading. We have trained all of our primary teachers in LETRS Volume 1, which has really given them that foundation. And so now it's no longer, they're looking at DIBELS from the perspective of, okay, well, this kid will likely be ready for first grade, or this kid will likely be ready for second grade. They actually know what the information means and where to go from here. And so I feel like that was part of the missing piece for our teachers. They were looking at their data, but they didn't really know, okay, so they're, struggling with, PSF. Okay, so what am I going to do each day that takes them and builds on where they're at and where that I want them to be? And so that's been really beneficial to our teachers. And I think now they're better able to take some of the information within the DIBELS program and like next steps and really utilize that, because they have that bigger picture of how the brain works and how students are going to take that information and build upon it.
Well, and I'd like to have either Amber or Shannon talk, because you just mentioned using that data, really like knowing what to do next. And when we spoke earlier, it was that state requirement. We're doing this because we need to collect data. But talk about after that state requirement, what happened, as we move forward, with the next steps to just for the sake of collecting data. And maybe even the tools that are within mCLASS that you utilize that continue to help teachers use that data to help students.
All right, so when we first did this, the paper and pencil DIBELS before it was Amplify, we did nothing with the data. We did it because we checked the box that we had to do that. The second year, we were looking at it thinking we need to do something with this data. We have this data, we finally have some data. And we really only focused on the students that were in the red, or the students that were well below. And we put, and this is kindergarten. We were only looking at kindergarten at that point. So that's when we were able to look at what was being assessed and what our core curriculum had. And looking as a whole, we could see that we were missing some components on phonemic awareness, right? So that's when we were able to go, and the Amplify data is what led us to that. Not, you get a core curriculum, you think it has everything. It's got the bells and whistles, it has what you need. But then when you're looking at a data piece that is aligned to the science reading, the core curriculum is aligned to science reading, but it's not the core's assessment, it's something coming in. It does give you a better perspective of where are there some gaps. And we saw that the phonemic awareness needed to be lifted up. That's when we were able to share the Amplify resources for the teachers for the reading specialist, and we looked at what are some of those Amplify lessons that we can use to beef up our core curriculum so that we know that our students are getting more of that phonemic awareness. That is so important, going back to understanding the science of reading. Did you?
Well, and I was going to say, I think, keep going, Shannon.
Well, I was just going to say, now that we are, like I mentioned, assessing the students that are K-5 3 times a year, looking back at or where we are with it now, I personally think we don't necessarily need to assess all the students again 3 times a year if they're showing that they are above benchmark. But I think that we're right now looking at the students that are falling within that yellow range. The students that are in the red, we're making sure that they're getting the interventions. But what we're seeing for the students in the yellow range is fluency in grades 3, 4, and 5 is lacking. So again, the data is helping us find those holes in our core curriculum so that we can make sure that we're meeting all the needs for these, all the components, or all what's important for science of reading.
Well, and Becky, you mentioned fluency. We talked about fluency as well. And we also talked about using those tools. And I'm going to pull up one of those activities so people can see what we're talking about with small group instruction in that activity. But you mentioned upper grade teachers, and I'd love for you to share about that.
Sure. There were 2 things that we really noticed. We actually, I forgot to add this in our journey. We were doing giving DIBELS in grades K-5, but when we adopted DIBELS 8, we extended it into 6th grade because because our elementary buildings are K-6. And so we wanted that full range of data, especially since we know that we have a lot of struggling readers, who are still in those upper grades. So one thing that we noticed was that our students were accurate, but not fluent. So you have to dig deeper than just the composite score that's given. So we analyzed our data in 4 through 6. It was like, wow, that, their accuracy it improves. It keeps going up every time, we're giving the benchmark, but their rate is poor. And so we talked about what that means. Does it mean that, they're taking up too much of the brain work with decoding. So the teachers were saying, okay, so in addition to that, we have pockets of students who are still struggling at the phonics level, the phonemic level. And I had a 6th grade teacher reach out to me at the beginning of this year. Remember, she hadn't given the assessment before. And she was like, okay, I do not. She said, I think it's important to know too, licensure here is 4 through 9. So, she had taken maybe 1 phonics class in addition to her content area and all her certification classes. She said, how do I know what to do with these students? She knew how to help, with some of the fluency issues, but she was saying, what about students who are showing that they need actual decoding help at the CVC level, those not multisyllabic words earlier than that. So we used this tool. We used the instruction tab here, and then I showed her how it broke all of her students down into groups. And then it said, based on even the most recent progress monitoring data, you could sync, and you don't have to go to the sync station anymore. You can just update it right on your computer. And so she said, oh my goodness, right here, it tells you groupings. It shows you what students need. So here she had students who were right in that decoding group. They're in 6th grade. And so she could expand that little activity section. It showed her the students. And then it had downloadable PDFs of small group lessons that she could do with them. And so that was my first instinct, because she was in a panic mode. She was saying, I've gotten this data. I don't feel like I have the tools that I need to reach that, students who are struggling at that level. So we went right in there. And also our district has had a heavy emphasis on the gradual release of responsibility in our lessons. So we love that, they have that modeling. It's very clear. It's right there for them. She didn't have to go out and spend her entire weekend trying to figure out what to do and patch things up. Basically, she was able to have access right there to lessons that were based on her student needs. So that was, I mean, very helpful. And not just that situation, but in that one, it helped her kind of calm down. She was like, I have this right here. Okay, I feel like I can do something with this now. And then we know then as a district, we do also need to provide support for our teachers, you know, beyond just this, but this has been a wonderful support for teachers at all levels, especially our 4 through 6 teachers.
So, and I'd love to add a couple of things about that. Thank you for sharing, because that explicit instruction, and a couple of you mentioned, I mean, the dyslexia emphasis and screening, and, you know, the explicit instruction in these quick lessons is built in. And so teachers are not having to go find those things, the research-based activities that are going to support kids in working on skills like phonemic awareness, blending and segmenting, all of those things that kids need to be able to do to both decode and encode. And so these tools are there for teachers. And as you said, from K to 5, or I'm sorry, K to 6, they're available, and those grouping mechanisms are definitely there. So teachers can go in there and get those activities, but they can also just pull activities. So we've got the grouping and the activities that are together or separate, and I can look by grade level. So that's a really useful tool as well. I'd love to hear if anyone else has teachers using the any of their favorite tools on the platform, and if they want to share anything about that.
I will do a quick plug for the Home Connect piece. We, again, part of the bill or part of our law is that we need to let the parents know, or let the families know if a student is receiving supplemental supports. So if a student is identified as at risk, then we let the parents know. In the past, we only let the parents know if they were going to receive supplemental supports. But when we saw these home reports, they're really good, that we made the decision to go ahead and send them home for everybody. And so every student gets this home report. The one thing, it's the language is very user friendly. It's not too much education, language. It gives great examples. And if you scroll down, there are ideas of things that you can do at home that are easy, that you can go with. The other thing is that if you go back, see how there's a little graphic by each area for more activities on the Home Connect, you can click on that link, and then you can just go to the different graphics, and there are more activities. So we've listed all of these resources on our homepage for our families, so that families know that they can go there to find additional resources. It's excellent for families that ask, what else can I do at home? Just giving some suggestions. And it's good because the teachers then know what to suggest to the parents as well. Like we said earlier, the teachers are still in this journey of understanding and learning the science of reading. So this helps to provide those resources for the teachers to give suggestions for the families.
Shannon, I was going to add too that not only with what you're saying, but then with what Becky had stated. So along with the Home Connect report, we've developed an additional letter about now what. So this is the data for my child. This is what's going to happen next. They're going to continue in first instruction. They're going to receive an intervention. They're going to be closely monitored. So there's like a process, and then there's been teacher development with that. And similar to, I think, what Becky said about training for that data instruction, we had to develop a whole process and put examples of, okay, my student has this score in phonemic awareness. What are my options with first instruction and Amplify resources? How am I going to progress monitor them so that they aren't trying to manage all of that on their own in an unfamiliar space, because they don't all have that science of reading background.
And you mentioned progress monitoring. And so going to that, teachers, one of the things about the platform as well, it provides a lot of teacher building capacity within. And so when you look at, setting goals and looking at progress monitoring scores and looking at the aim line, clicking on students and seeing those graphs that go along with the data to really give that visual image for students and caregivers as well. And my little screen is going to freeze up for us here. Here we go. And so, you know, these help teachers see things in different ways that they might not have seen prior to using a platform that really analyzes that. And, you know, again, we didn't even hit upon the fact that they can go in and see the probes. That's something that when you are doing, you know, with a paper pencil, or you're doing something where you don't have access to something digitally, you know, as I pull up a student, I want to see what's happening with that child, and I want to see the actual probe, so that if Erin is assessing and I'm the coach, I can go in and see Erin's assessment, and we can talk about that child.
So, and just something to add to that, I love that you pointed that out, Karen. So when we began our DIBELS 8 journey through mCLASS, our coaches, building coaches and interventionists were the ones to do the assessment. They did the screening. That's where it started, right? And then we slowly started building teams, and there were instructional aides who were added to the assessment team. And that's what it looked like across our district the first year. And it was overwhelming for many. Right. Many of our interventionists felt like we just need more people. We need more on the team. And who else? And Erin, can you come assess? Or we're not going to make this window. We need more people. And we slowly started like, what if teachers start doing this? What if teachers start owning data? What if teachers start progress monitoring? And now we're 3 years into our DIBELS 8 mCLASS journey, which is not that far by any means. We have a lot of teachers now progress monitoring, especially with, and I heard someone else mention it, LETRS training. So all of our teachers are getting LETRS trained, and they're now asking teachers who in the past who may have been a little bit resistant, like, when am I going to, time is always the biggest challenge, right? When am I going to do this? Are now recognizing like, this is really valuable. So yes, I can see when someone else assesses my children, I can go in and look at what they did. But if I can sit down with them, I can learn so much more about them. And once they do it, like, oh, this isn't that hard. And I can move through my class pretty quickly and learn, and not have to then go look at the reports because I just did it with them. So I think that alone is such a huge leap in professional development for our teachers, both starting progress monitoring and learning by doing and sitting with their kids, and also the LETRS PD.
And a couple of things, Erin, you bring up LETRS PD, and I know Ashlie mentioned that everyone on the call has LETRS training in the background, and rolling that out to districts. We did 2 webinars with our Science of Reading Star Award winners and our CKLA. That's a common thread that goes through everyone. And I continue to hear that. And it's really because for those that may not be familiar with LETRS, what LETRS is, and I don't know if someone else wants to share that kind of background versus me. Anyone? It's basically you're learning the foundations of what teachers need to teach phonics. You're learning about the Scarborough's rope. You're learning about what kids need, both foundational skills and in oral language development. It's not a program. It's an understanding of what students need, how we learn to read. And so you can apply those skills. That's why it's a common thread that goes through everyone, because you can apply those skills and how important that is. You are all talking about data and using that. And and I know we're coming to the end here. Becky, you mentioned using the reporting system, and we haven't even talked about the wonderful rich RAS system, reporting and analysis suite. And maybe Becky, you want to just share, because you were with that correlation report and how that's helping inform folks. And I'll pull an image of that up as well.
Absolutely. One of the things that we did like I said, had us stay with mCLASS as we decided to shift from DIBELS Next Acadience to DIBELS 8 was that we really liked the reports, and our teacher leaders who lead data meetings in the buildings and our administrators really enjoyed the reports as well. So one that we have really used over the past couple of years is the correlation report. So what we like about that is that you can compare apples to apples. So what you would do is you run the report you can do it at middle of year, and then it will show you your beginning of year data. And so it'll say, at the beginning of the year, there were 100 first graders. This number, here we go. You could do it as percentage or head count. We like to run it as head count. So you can actually see of your students who were at benchmark, so green in the green category at the beginning of the year, you can see, 12 of them, let's see, have moved down to red. You can see that, they were at benchmark at the beginning of the year. Now this number of them are above benchmark. So what we found when we looked at that, we looked at very recently at a building, many of our students who were we looked at it K1 specifically, students who were below that yellow range, many of them either stayed in the yellow range or they moved to well below. So we have done some activities where you dig down to the student level, and some of our teacher leaders will do something where kids are like on Post-it notes. And so they have the teachers kind of move, they have something where they show where the kids were, and then they pull up the correlation report, and then they show where they are now. And so it's a very, big, clear visual representation about how are we moving students. And the last part of that, how well are we moving students, is that we noticed, okay, if you just look at, the student number, students had grown, but they were still keeping that gap. So, here was benchmark, here was where they were, and they just stayed right here. They didn't quite make that jump up to benchmark. So it really helped us see at the student level where students were and where they are now. Are they making the progress they should be? So that's been a very valuable report to us as we look at our data.
And thank you for sharing that, because the reporting is really rich. And I know we could go into depth on that. I shared a document that really gets into the reporting. So if folks want to look at that, there's tutorials on that. We are coming to the end, and I want to honor people's time. I know we started a little bit late. I cannot believe what wonderful conversation we've had here today. And I really appreciate all of our team sharing with these wonderful stories and how they've helped students and teachers move forward. We do have other webinars coming up that I want to share with you that we'd love for you to join. And again, you can sign up and get the recording. If there's any last word from our panelists or I would love for you to share anything as we go, but it's a happy Tuesday, and I think we'll probably leave it at that. I hope we answered all the questions that we were trying to answer in the chat or I can't thank you enough. The ladies, it's been amazing, and I've learned so much, and I hope our participants have as well. Any last words? Just everyone got everything they needed to say. And I thank you so much, and come back again, and please don't be a stranger. We're excited to have this base of knowledge to share with others. And I think that's it. Steve, have we answered all the questions? Yes. I'm just waiting for Steve. I think that's it. I think Steve already jumped off. So, all right, ladies, thanks. Have a great rest of your day, and happy spring. It's coming. And thank you so much. This was wonderful. Really appreciate you spending the time with us today. And have a great rest of your day.